Connectivist view learning as network formation. And what is a classroom if not a social network? Students are connected with each other by virtue of being in the same class and having the same teacher. They often work collaboratively and learn from each other. But what if we could expand that learning beyond the classroom? In my vision paper, I imagined a not too distant future where students take ownership over their learning and connect to other learners in a variety of ways. One of the ways I imagined them connecting was through social networking sites like Facebook. Here's how I've been using social networking with my students. I wanted to use a site like Facebook so my students could create profile pages for the characters in The Great Gatsby. But I couldn't use Facebook because it was often blocked by school internet filters. I also didn't like the idea of students posting fake identities to a public site. That's what led me to Ning. Ning is an online platform that allows individuals to create social networks for any kind of group they want. These networks can either be public or private. I essentially asked students to imagine that Facebook was around during the time of The Great Gatsby, and then I had students imagine how the characters would interact on that site. Students created status updates, uploaded profile pictures, and chose templates that suited their character. They also wrote on each other's walls and created and joined groups that their character would join. Finally, I had them write a series of short blog posts to demonstrate their understanding of their particular character's point of view. Using social media made this project a lot more engaging for students because it more closely mirrored the types of communication they were used to doing outside the classroom. But when considering Bloom's taxonomy, I realized that most of the thinking students were demonstrating was fairly low level. Still, through the discussions that had been taking place on students' walls, I could see the potential for higher order thinking. Next, we moved on to using the network to expand our literature circles beyond the bricks and mortar of our school. At first, the site functioned more like a study guide where students shared links and uploaded content that would help them understand their novels. I used to do background lessons on all of our novels, but then I figured, why not let them construct the background lesson? After each literature circle meeting, we would go to the computer lab and students would log into the network and blog about their books. Then they would read and comment on what their classmates had written. By responding to their classmates' comments, they were able to see diversity of opinion and reconsider prior assumptions. Students would tag their blog posts, and then as they prepared for the essay, which admittedly is not my ideal culminating task, but I get overruled by my colleagues in this area, they used the tags to find related posts from their classmates. They used the ideas from the blog posts then to develop their thesis statements. In my media class last year, my students teamed up with a class in Listowel. This is where I really saw the potential for social networking open up. Students were able to participate in online conversations even though they lived in different cities. They read each other's blog posts and wrote on each other's walls. They shared different perspectives and found common ground. Here's what really surprised me about the process. When students created their Facebook-style pages, not every student embraced the idea. I had assumed that since this was the type of communication that my students did outside the classroom, the transition to using this tool inside the classroom would be a seamless one. But my students were suspicious of using tools that they were not used to having academic success with, no matter how interesting or engaging the tool was. In that way, students are not all that different from teachers. You have to make new experiences low risk and allow time to play and experiment and problem solve. They need to feel free to make mistakes without being penalized. When my students blogged, they were initially very shy about sharing their writing with the rest of the class for fear of judgment. Everything I'd read taught me that students needed authentic writing opportunities in order to be engaged, and writing for the teacher was not authentic. But I didn't consider the fact that while inauthentic, writing for the teacher was safe. As time passed, they gained confidence and couldn't wait to check their blogs for comments. One of my favorite posts came from a student who had been painfully shy about her writing. By the end of the semester, she was able to reflect on how she'd grown and how she now viewed herself as a good writer, thanks in part to the feedback from her peers. Our social networking sites allowed students to comment, question, and make connections, extending their understanding in such a way that I was no longer the keeper of all knowledge. And that can be a disconcerting place for a teacher to be. Sometimes I felt like I wasn't working hard enough because the students were taking all the responsibility for the learning. But the thing I started to realize was that I had to get away from the idea that it was my job to teach them The Great Gatsby. Because let's face it, after grade 11, their knowledge of the plot of The Great Gatsby might help them out one night during Jeopardy, but that's about it. Instead, they developed problem-solving and critical thinking skills that they'd be able to use even if they never studied English again. But the biggest surprise was also the most positive one. My biggest concern when I started using social networking sites was that I'd have issues of bullying. Conventional wisdom taught me that the perceived anonymity of the internet led students to say things to each other online that they would never say face-to-face. Our site wasn't open to the public, so students weren't completely anonymous. But they did say things online that they wouldn't have said face-to-face. They were kind. They were very supportive. They moved beyond the cliques and social groups and supported each other in ways that really took me by surprise. I hope that by modeling positive and constructive use of technology in the classroom, students will practice better digital citizenship outside the classroom. I know that as teachers, we're hesitant to try new things without completely understanding how that new thing works. But we expect our students to try new things that they don't fully understand every day. If we encourage our students and our colleagues to take positive risks in a supportive environment, we just might surprise ourselves.